Yes, and look at Alireza. Yeah, okay. I'm in sleeping mode. It's just everyday business, right? Fantastic.
Love it. And we've got some more moves. This is our bird's eye view to take in all the opening action. So we see very similar pawn moves on all the boards. That's what strikes to me with the white pieces, except on Magnus's board where we see the move b4 opening up the queen. That's the third board from the right here, opening up the queen instead of opening up the bishop. The other players going for a similar approach, Peter.
Yes, and there is also this vulnerable spot on g7 and g2, yeah? So now Magnus going for c4. Now black can play the move bishop c8 to b7. No, he first plays the move c5. I just want to highlight that, yes, one has to watch out, yeah? Because both after bishop b2 and after bishop b7, mutual craziness, mutual problems are really happening. And it will be a big question. How does white react to it, or black? Against bishop b2 idea, but for the moment Magnus is taking his time. He has to decide what he does with his b4 pawn. Does he include the move bishop b2 immediately, just to get some feeling that how black is really trying to protect that weakness?
Big question here, Nicholas. What do you make of this thought? Because from move number 3, I think I'm allowed to say this, it's an absolutely fresh position that we have on the board. But bishop b2, are you expecting that on the board now?
Bishop b2 would be a very logical move to line up the battery against the pawn on g7. And, well, black needs to defend this pawn for sure. So the only two sensible options that I see are either to play f6 or to play e5. But e5 is not really a move that you want to play because it weakens some squares. So in another game that we saw, or that I've seen at least already that is happening, f6 was played, and f6 also has some advantages that you can maybe develop the knight. On the other hand, it is also a weakening move, so it is also something which you don't really like to do. However, you have to deal with this threat in one way or another. You cannot allow that the bishop takes on g7. And if I can consult a computer, there is another way which I didn't see besides f6 and e5, and that is the move knight to e6. Knight to e6 also defending the pawn on g7. Maybe this is the most harmonious or the least weakening way, because you're not pushing any pawn move, and maybe the most sensible. So I think the next few moves will be critical in deciding if white can get some initiative going, can use this extra move that white has. Peter?
Yes, in the game I think b takes e5, b takes e5, knight g3, knight g6 had happened. This is also one of these type of positions. I feel like Alireza feels like, okay, it's symmetrical, but at least as long as there are no direct threats, I can make those moves instantly. I'm winning time. And the big question is, yeah, that is in long terms white able to pose problems, or if white misses the chance on capitalizing on something early on the game, then black will just be fine. That's a very big question. I do feel that Alireza is feeling quite confident. He's in every single game playing the opening phase quite quickly. So again, up on the clock.
An absolute symmetrical position, but now it has to be broken because white comes in with the first threat in the position, lining up with the bishop and the queen. G7 is a tender spot. Alireza needs to make a decision how he wants to defend it. Knight e6, the move that you were discussing earlier, it looks very logical. You can maybe think about f6 with pawn moves. I'm not really sure how quickly you want to make them. Commit yourself to this pawn structure of f6. Maybe you're creating some weaknesses. Wow, and Alireza goes for it.
Yeah, he goes for f6 because he wants to somehow get that knight to f7, and he also feels that maybe it will be very important that I trade that bishop, that dark square bishop with bishop e5, or maybe he will even say that, you know what, look at this. White has this incredible battery on the long diagonal, but if black simply blocks it with f6, then this battery brings absolutely nothing. So it's very interesting and refreshing to see how Alireza quickly, yeah, basically after 10 seconds makes a decision like f6. This is the strength, the power of the youth. Yeah, you are not fearing any ghost. You don't think about, is this a weakness? No, it has also a lot of positive things. Yeah, there are a lot of arguments why this move is strong. I love this determination.
And he's got to be feeling determined, especially after the match that they just had. What do you think about those dynamics? These two have just played quite an epic battle. in the grand final of the Chessable Masters, and it was fireworks from the start. Alireza taking the first set, Magnus bouncing back to take the championship in the final set. But the games are full of fire. Do you think that's on their mind, Peter?
I think not. First of all, because the match was incredible. Yeah, so I don't think that if you lose an incredible match like this, where you can be so proud of yourself, like Alireza played a brilliant match. Finally, Magnus prevailed. But it's more like he feels that, okay, yes, I have played enough games against Magnus, but this is our first freestyle chess game against each other. So it's a completely fresh start. And so far, I feel like, you know, there are two things. The older generation loves to play freestyle chess, Fischer random chess, because they have been studying already for more than 20 years with super engines, all the theoretical lines, and they are kind of tired and they are exhausted. They have been exhausting all possibilities. And the youngsters, they feel like we still have so much to learn in classical chess, but we enjoy, you know, not learning, just playing. And they are very fresh. So I also find it very nice that we have this clash of generations. And so far, the Jacks are doing extremely well.
They really are. Kings are having a tough time. The other dynamic into play, the fact that, you know, we've got the most important event of the chess calendar coming up, the candidates, in 2 months. And very often in classical chess, they have to watch out for what openings they're playing leading up to the candidates. And that always stops them from showing their best hands. But that is something, having some of the very crucial candidates in this event participating, that's not something they need to worry about in freestyle chess. They can bring on the creativity from the very start. And we see a mirror image here. The symmetry in the position continues. The players are playing copycat chess.
Yes, but here now the copycat chess was played by Magnus, which shows that actually the move f7, f6, that we were debating that is it a weakness or not, it had a huge impact on Magnus. Yeah, he didn't dare to play f3 himself before Black played the move f6, but now he okay, it's a nice idea. Wow, very nice.
And it wasn't only the bishop and the queen lined up on the attack. The knight could have jumped to key squares like f5, f4, putting more pressure. So at some point, you needed to blunt this diagonal. It's been done by both. The ball is in Alireza's court. What are you expecting here, Nicholas? Now, he has to change things up. Or does he continue with bishop b7, achieving the perfect symmetry?
Yes, Alireza could play bishop b7, then it would be a perfectly symmetrical position. But he doesn't have to, he could also do something else. And in general, I think this opening phase has gone pretty well for the French player. He plays knight to f7 now, developing the knight. He's up 5 minutes on the clock. He's playing with confidence. He's playing fast, and this is a very important factor when playing rapid chess, obviously. And Carlsen, we also saw him on the camera. We see him right now. He's not looking so happy. And I think, if I may point this out, this decision to play b4 earlier and to grab more space might have backfired a little bit, because eventually, as opposed with the pawn on b3, eventually you cannot play d4 as nicely, since if you do, for example, let me do it here, then you always end up with an isolated pawn here on c4, whereas if the pawn was still on b3 and on b6, it would be a different story. And we have seen actually a lot of the other players to put the pawn on b3, to not go for b4, not grab that space. And now we are in this position after knight f2. Once again, bishop b7 would lead to a completely symmetrical position, but it seems like the bishop is not really achieving that much on this diagonal right now, so I expect firouzja to continue in a different fashion. And you feel like slowly it's heating up. Slowly the pieces are coming closer to the king. What a strange situation. Peter, what do you think?
Yeah, it's a very slow affair. I think that White has missed on the chance of capitalizing on the starting position. I believe that Alireza can be very happy with everything, and it might be a good opportunity to jump to some other games. Because this is now a slow affair. It might be a very interesting strategical game later on, but for the moment it takes a slower pace.
And Nicholas, you said strange. Strange is the new normal when it comes to freestyle chess, because the starting positions themselves are so unique, completely fresh chess, and that's what we love about this format. We will pull up the bird's eye view. We will zoom out for a moment and get an update on all our other games as the players are deciding where to place the pieces, how to begin the game. So let's bring up our bird's eye view. And then perhaps we can jump into and deep dive into a position. And there we have it. We see the start of the games, and so far everything is level. And once again, we see on our extreme right board, Fabiano Caruana's queen is out early on with perhaps a lining up of the bishop and the queen, but in the right way, where you then start threatening a mate on g7. The f-pawn has moved forward. It promises to be an exciting fight. So far, level. Meanwhile, we've discussed a lot about the Magnus game. And then a really interesting development in the world champion facing your protege, Vincent Keymer. Would you like to take a deep dive into that one, Peter?
Yes, the reason why I'm actually very interested in this game and also in Fabi's game, I'm comparing the two positions. Yeah, if we look at that, we see that it's almost a mirror, but with opposite colors. Yeah, so Fabiano opted for quick d4 and activated his queen with queen takes d4, and Vincent made also good use of the chance to go d5 and queen takes d5. Very interesting to see which approach allowing this d5 move was a good idea from Ding or not. For the moment, from a distance, it looks like black should be happy.
Well, the queen is out. It is developed. The white king still in that diagonal. Maybe there might be a check, but the bishop on b2 controls a key d4. Square. Meanwhile, Levon and Gukesh also continues to be very interesting, taking a similar approach like the Magnus Alireza, blunting the diagonal, the long diagonal a1 to h8 with that move f6. What catches your attention? Which one should we go to first?
Well, I think all the games have their own finesses. It's up to us. Whom did we cover the least? I think that would be now a very fair thing.
Vincent.
Vincent, okay, that's it. Dingren against
Immediately
Vincent.
Peter jumps into the game.
Okay.
No surprises there.
Okay, also Vincent has activated his queen to d5. Yeah, he's also aiming towards the Marozzi structure. Yeah, that's the Marozzi bind. If black also gets the move e5 in, maybe he does not even need to, because this e5 square can also be used maybe for bishop e5 or knight e5 ideas. I want
Bishop and the queen on this diagonal, hitting the pawn on h7, and again the question how to deal with this. You could play a move like g6, but it's also weakening up the king a little bit further, and Vincent actually opts for the strongest move, queen h5, not only defending the pawn on h7, but also, watch out, the bishop and the queen line up for almost a checkmate threat on h2. So now white has to deal with this threat on his own, and most probably will play the knight out to g3, hitting the queen. You don't want to give up your bishop, so you just move to queen 4 to h4, and still this looks a little bit uncomfortable with potential threats that black can maybe take on g3. And also here the action feels like slowly heating up. The bishops from the back, they're long range pieces, they're pointing towards the respective kings, and it seems to me that, well, this could become very sharp very soon, potentially. Tanya.
Very sharp, very soon. You're pointing out all these tactical ideas. The one thing that strikes to me in this position, Peter, is that white has a nasty threat. Look at black's pieces. That rook on e8 doesn't really have a square to move to. You move your queen. Can white start getting greedy already? My bishop on d3, queen on b1. Yes, it was eyeing the king side, but suddenly I shift my focus. I want an exchange, bishop to b5.
Yes, but actually this light square bishop is kind of a monster bishop. And we do see sometimes, there were some lines in the English opening where black can sacrifice an exchange like this in Marozzi structures and get an overwhelming initiative. I also feel that maybe that's the reason why Vincent has paused, because he believes in the attack. Yeah, queen h4, and if you go, okay, let's just put it on the board, yeah, because queen h4, bishop b5, that's what we are talking about. Yeah, Vincent, I believe from his hand movement, he had to play queen h4. The rook on e8 is trapped, but black gets some incredible activity. I don't know, something like knight g5, going for bishop takes g3, a g3, queen takes g3, and then already crazy ideas like knight h3 check are hanging in the air. I would be very scared from the white side to enter something like this.
And what a day Vincent has had, right? He starts with a draw against Magnus. He takes down Levon Aronian in round 2. And now in this fighting position, by the way, we're seeing this being played out. So this as well is going to be quite the explosive fight as Vincent has gone all in, sacrificing the exchange. Bishop b5 has been played? Yes, Bishop b5 on the board now, which means that Vincent has to go for White's king now.
Wow, okay, so Bishop b5 played. Yeah, Vincent will be forced to go for attack. I, however, want to caution it. Don't jinx it. I mean, let Vincent do his job. I'm here as a commentator. I'm clearly rooting for him. I'm very happy if he does well. But yes, let him just play. Yeah, this is also, we haven't mentioned that we are treated here magnificently in this weissnhause luxury resort. The players have everything. The commentators have everything. We are enjoying our time, and I think that also the players, we see these crazy games, these fantastic, fascinating battles, are also in extremely creative mood because of all these incredible settings, this environment. The organizational team with Jan-Henrik Büttner is making sure that everybody feels at home. It's just so nice to be here.
It's super nice, and Weissnhause is one of the world's best nature retreats. It's all about the calm and the peace that you feel here, but the chess, the freestyle chess has been absolute chaos from the very start, and this position promises to bring on more of that chaos as the world champion Ding Liren is in fact going for that exchange. Vincent has to prove his compensation, has to prove his initiative in this position. Is this a good moment to zoom out and get an update from on the other boards just for a moment?
I think maybe we can ask Nicholas, because Nicholas knows the truth. Let's ask him.
Well, I have, of course, a little bit of help, and it is quite interesting to see how the different variations can play out here. The computer is just saying zeros, which means equal in chess terms. And you have different options. As Peter said, you can bring the knight forward to g5. You can also take on g3 immediately if you want to. There are also moves maybe like knight e6, but let's look for a very concrete line here. Knight g5, all right, white takes the rook, what else to do? Black can take back, or even already think about trying to go for a drawing combination with knight h3 apparently, takes and now take on g3, and if white takes back, then it would be a perpetual check, because the queen just gives continuous checks and black cannot further strengthen the attack. So here white could play something else, but apparently even after knight f2, rook takes e8, it should end up in an equal position. But I wouldn't go for this knight h3 immediately. It looks more sensible to just take back, to keep all the threats in the position, maybe to take on g3 first, since white cannot really stop that anyway. And I would be a bit concerned here with white. The computer is saying knight c3, and now, okay, many options. Black definitely has a lot of compensation, and Vincent seems to have judged it correctly, that he can sacrifice his exchange in that way. Now he just tries to find the best way forward after bishop b5. I think he will probably spend some more time, so if we want to, we can go to another game.
And I think I know exactly the one that both of you would love analyzing. We have to rush over to Levon versus Gukesh because it's absolute chaos on the board. And Nicholas, we have to take this, I think, from the top, because it's impossible to understand all the pieces hanging in the current board as we see it. So show us how we got here and break it down for us.
Absolutely. So I don't know if we saw this already. I don't think so. We see the starting moves now. Again, quite similar to the other games. In early d4, now black didn't take on d4, allowing the capture. We see the bishop lining up. And now let me maybe slow down so we can really understand what is going on. So the knight is coming into the center. And here, interestingly, queen c6 was the response. And Gukesh actually did not, or he ignored, or maybe didn't see the white threat, which was to take on f6 to break open the black king position. So if black was to take back, which Gukesh did not do, then the knight would take on f6. It's a fork to the rook and the king, and well, either way, white is getting one of the rooks, and here white has 2 pawns plus the rook against 2 minor pieces, and the important thing is that the king is pretty open, so white would be in good shape, which is why Gukesh did not take, and maybe this was the move he had in mind when he allowed this capture on f6, which looks quite scary, to play d5, hitting the knight on e4, and only if the knight moves, then to take the bishop on f6. But white can react and has different captures, can take on g7, can take on d8, and here Levon took on d8, and now it is actually Gukesh to move and to decide which minor piece to take, the knight on e4 or the bishop on d8. Apparently he is supposed to take on d8, but then, well, white is up a pawn, if I'm not mistaken.
And
however,
I think he has just captured, yeah, he took on d8.
However, this guy is also hanging, but, well, there's a checkmate threat, watch out. Always these long-range pieces here out of the corner, so there's a checkmate threat on h7 now, but black can play g6. It looks quite scary for black being down a pawn and having an open king, but according to the computer, guys, this seems to be still okay for Gukesh. So this is probably going to be played out.
It's all on the board. Nicholas, the exact line that you pointed out, a mate in one is threatened right now. Bishop takes pawn, a massive threat which Gukesh will stop. He is reaching out. It's probably going to be g6. And I just want to point out, shut castle is still legal for white.
Yes, it is legal. And now also let's talk about the potential compensation for black. Yeah, that white is a pawn up, seemingly is attacking, but black has this long-term asset, the dark squared bishop. Yeah, and just imagine some scenario where this bishop is landing on e5, targeting that queen on a1 in the corner. Yeah, that would be a deadly scenario for white. And also black has kind of this, yeah, castles played, of course. Yeah, the pawn on h2 was hanging. Yeah, bishop was threatening to capture on h2 before. So the move short castle make perfect sense. However, now black has this extra move. The big question is, what do we do with it? Yeah, this kind of structure, what does it remind us? On the Blumenfeld gambit, right? That black sacrifices the pawn. Yes, on the other hand, white still has the pawn on c4, so it did not have to double it on the b file. But there is, I very much sense what computer is saying. Yeah, knight f7, I wouldn't be sure at all that white really has the advantage. Okay, he has the pawn, but black has long-term compensation here.
And there black is trying to get rid of his own least developed piece, that knight on h8, for white's most active knight on g5. So definitely a trade that will suit Gukesh a lot. The rook will step up, line up on the f line, putting pressure. The bishop pair advantage against the pawn sacrifice gives long-term compensation. You're absolutely right. It is a lot like the standard Blumenfeld pawn sacrifices that we see. So it's far, far from clear in this position. It's going to be a fun one. Nicholas, I see you're also doing a deep dive into this. Would you rather be white having an extra pawn, or would you rather play to try to prove your compensation with the bishop pair here?
Well, I definitely like to be on the attack. I like to have the initiative. I like to give material rather than to defend material that I have won. So I would prefer black here. And now Gukesh just played knight to f7, which the computer doesn't actually approve so much. The move makes a lot of sense to get rid of this active knight on g5. However, maybe it would have been better to push this knight away with a move like bishop f4 and say that this knight actually is not really in a good spot anyway. Knight f3, d4 to further play in the center. e5, e4 is coming. The knight on d1 is misplaced. So this was the direction of the computer. Gukesh takes a slower approach, playing knight f7. I guess the knights will be traded here. And now he can also double up on the f-file. However, white is still fairly solid. He just needs to find a way to get these pieces on the back rank to better squares. The knight on d1, the bishop on b1, all don't look too great. So if white can do that, if he can get his piece into play, consolidate it a bit more, then he has a pawn. He has an extra pawn. He can be better. What do you guys think? Should we move on to another game?
Yes, I think so, because it's clear that this is long-term compensation. Yeah, there will be many dramas in this game. Yeah, Levon captures on f7. Okay, this happened. This gives us a chance to catch up with.
I think he's just reaching out for his next move. He improves the position of the queen. And Peter, as you were pointing out, let's bring out our bird's eye view and see where the action is, where we want to jump in next. Let's zoom out from this game for the moment. To do a deep dive into one of our other boards and bring up our bird's eye view. I see action is on all the other boards.
for example, Fabiano Caruana and Nodirbek Abdusatov we haven't really been looking at yet. This could be both players are on fire. Yeah, they are playing brilliant chess.
And perhaps we could just go directly to that one, Peter. On our analysis board, we can have that up as we pull the live board for our audience as well. And that is the current position.
Wow, okay, so this already reminds me of some kind of a Queen's Indian, also some Paulsen kind of structure. It's very interesting. First feeling is that White has only 2 pawn islands, yeah, and Black has 3. So thanks to the pawn structure, White should have the better position. But in all these type of positions, there's so much activity. And we see that the White knight on e3 is somehow a little bit awkwardly placed. The pawn on e6 is beautifully dominating that knight. Black has the semi-open f-file with good counter chances. It's very much an Abdusatov type of position where there is so much potential for aggressive play.
And yet it's just starting to heat up. So there are all these possibilities. We know Nodirbek, he's such a fighter and he really thrives in these kind of positions which are not dull and dry. And the action, it's sort of like the storm is just brewing up. Peter, you're mentioning that, you know, Black has all these ideas to start putting pressure. Of course, the doubling up along the F line, the knight jumping from G6 to F4 at the right moment comes to mind. What about Fabi? Where are the trumps in his position? Because I also see for Fabi, that white knight on G3 can eventually find itself on H5 and doubling up with the bishop on B2 start putting pressure on G7.
Yes, I exactly had this feeling that if, yeah, knight H5 already played, that Fabi is very much the type of player who acknowledges that, yes, Black has nice kind of probably potential counterplay, but actually I have a very sound position. To knight from G3 moves to H5 and eventually White gets a chance of pushing F4, then things are turning, yeah, then we are not talking about Black having counterplay, Black will be cramped and F4, F5 might be looming there, so who is attacking whom on the king side? A lot at stake here. I think that Black has to stop White from playing F2, F4 at all costs, so something like Rook E8 to F8 should be played unless there is some crazy tactic. Yeah, we have to watch out, there are so many vulnerable squares. I think if we would ask Fabi, he would say, no, everything is fine, I'm enjoying this.
Let's turn to Nicholas for the ultimate truth in this position. Everything that we've been discussing about this, Black's ideas of doubling up, White's counterplay against G7, potential F4, what do you make of this? And who's trying to push for the initiative here?
Well, I think both players are probably happy with this position, as you both pointed out. They like these unbalanced positions. They like to attack. They like to have a lot of complexity in the position. And knight h5 is making a clear indication that Fabiano is not going to watch until Black is going to build up some kind of play on the f-file, on the squares here against the white king, but he wants to maybe go knight g4, maybe go f4, f5, maybe sacrifice on g7, because the king is a little bit vulnerable, it is a little bit open. The engine is evaluating this position as equal right now, which means that obviously both sides have their chances, and rook ef8 looks very logical to my eyes now, to double on the f-file and to put pressure here to also stop f4 apparently, because, well, you just occupy, you attack the square so many times. Now knight g4 looks interesting to me, to play with ideas of something, giving checkmate or sacrificing, but it doesn't seem to quite work yet, and Black has different ways to respond. Knight f4 looks very logical to trade this knight on h5 and go from there. So to summarize, after knight h5 both players are in good shape, and this could, I think, explode. There could be some sacrifices coming here, so we should keep an eye on it.
And look at the focus the two players have on the board right now. Absolutely a critical moment for them. And speaking of focus, the chat wants to focus on one particular game, and that is Magnus Carlsen taking on Alireza Firouzja, and that's exploding as well. We've had some trades in the center, some really exciting moves preceding the current board, and I think we have to back up, Peter, a little bit to see how we got to this point.
Yeah, because it had a slow pace. And we talked about this, that, yeah, it's going to be a fascinating battle. But what I see here at Magnus is having a wonderful position. He's already jumping with knight to f5, hitting the d6 pawn. White has this perfect harmony. Look at his pieces: knight on e4, knight on f5, queen c3, bishop on c2. The d6 pawn is weak. The g7 square is vulnerable. Alireza in a lot of trouble, but just very quickly, maybe we can jump to Nicholas. Yeah, you have this auto mode and everything. You are doing it so professionally. Just let's run through the game.
Sure, we can do that. So we stopped here in a completely symmetrical position after 8 moves. Absolutely completely symmetrical. So let's see how the game continued, developed from here. The knight came forward, d6 protecting, but yeah, somehow here firouzja, it seems, lost a little bit of the threat, putting his bishops on the side. The bishop came back, a lot of bishop moves, and Carlsen took slowly over, playing in the center. Again the bishop move here, and now he plays in the center, but a little bit too late. These knights are in very active positions, and as you pointed out, this pawn is hanging on d6. In general, the white pieces feel a little bit better placed. However, in this very moment, and apparently knight to f5 was a mistake by Magnus, because in this very moment, and he missed it, he could have played d5, putting maximum tension in the center and making use of the fact that this pawn is pinned, and this would have given him a good chance for an open game. But after queen c6, which was played, Magnus should be in front again. However, a lot of tension here, and I think the next few moves will be critical, Tanya.
And you really cannot fault a player for making a move like knight f5. It is such a natural human move. You want that knight on a beautiful square. You want to put pressure on d6. It looks like a very dominating position currently for Magnus Carlsen. And also, we can see, right, in Alireza's position, right now the queen and the bishop are eyeing the c4 pawn, but it feels like the forces are divided. You've got a bunch of pieces on the king side still finding their activity, and then there's queen and bishop on the other side of the board. Meanwhile, all of Magnus's army compact in the center, really sort of playing around the center and with the space that you have. But there is a threat on the board, Peter. c4 is hanging. How much of a threat is this actually with all the dynamics around the d6 pawn?
Yes, well, I would feel like, yes, okay, you want to take my c4 pawn. First of all, I can defend it if I want. The big question is, do I want to? Yeah, you highlighted, yeah, there are so many dynamic possibilities. One of the things Nicholas pointed out, this move d6, d5 by the computer, I'm looking at it, and once it's on the board, it's so natural, and I was asking myself, why didn't it cross my mind? But I also was so focused on this weakness on d6 and how do I protect it, that the move queen c6 looks quite natural. Another big question, does white have some really energetic response? Because one really feels that the position is asking for some very special treatment. Yeah, that's at least my kind of instinct, and Magnus is also taking his time, clearly believing that there could be something here.
I think what everyone playing white would love it is if somehow the queen and the knights could coordinate, because it feels like there is a kingside attack brewing. But also black's knight on g6 controls so much of the position. And we see Magnus, he's going into a bit of a think right now, is still in the air. It wasn't played in the last move, but let's say if you made a move like bishop to d3, I think d5 is still a possibility in the position.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, now also the queens are kind of pinning each other on the c file. There is so much tension, and Magnus absolutely correctly senses that this is a very critical moment. Yeah, he has to find the right idea here. I'm a little bit struggling to find the move which I would shout out that, okay, this is what my because I have so many ideas, but I don't exactly see yet what is the right way to proceed move per move.
Yeah, and for Alireza as well, there is pressure that he has to deal with. But I look at the camera in front of us, Alireza looks pretty chill about the position. He looks very relaxed.
Yeah, it seems like he has very good nerves. Yeah, he's just enjoying what he's doing. He can play chess, and no openings involved, just a wonderful environment.
Yeah, I think it's the weissnhause effect.
Yes, he is really, really enjoying himself.
And there we see Magnus Carlsen through the rooks over there. He's got a big decision to make. And Niklas, what do you make of this critical moment?
Well, I had a look with my friend, the engine, and the way forward, the only way forward to have a clear advantage, or maybe even close to winning advantage, is to take on e5. And this is maybe not a move that instantly comes to mind, but black doesn't really have a great response. For example, if I take back with the rook, then I can use some tactics here and take the pawn on d6. So this is getting a little bit crazy now, so bear with me. So the rook cannot take here on e1 because watch out, there's a checkmate on g7. So the rook is pinned, and this is a very critical idea in this position anyway. So now you might say, why can I not take on d6? Well, then I take back on e5. I have not only one pawn right now, but more importantly, I'm having a very strong attack against the black king, which black cannot actually defend anymore, and you cannot even take here because of instant disaster. Not only are you losing the queen, you're even getting checkmate the next move because the rook is coming up here, and this is it. So after d takes e5, if we go back to this moment, how should black really take back? And
but sorry to interrupt,
Yes.
Magnus has made a move and he missed on this chance.
he
played
played
the move
something
bishop
else. Bishop
b3.
b3.
Ooh.
Yeah, that looks a little bit
And Alireza reaches
passive.
out and he's got d5 on the board.
He did play d5. I mean, that was the move that we were expecting after
Yeah, and
bishop
knight
b3,
c5
bishop-
blitzed out by Magnus. That's the current.
Right.
And Alireza is blitzing his move bishop takes c4. Probably he is relieved, yeah, that some direct action is happening.
Have the players calculated this till the very end? They're not even blinking. It feels like a forced sequence of moves. And we see some trades there, Peter, which eventually ends with Alireza looking away for a moment, because this is a new position, a completely different dynamic from before the start of the sequence of this forced moves that we saw after d5. The knight on f7 is pinned. The knight on c5 is pinned. A lot of pins on the board and a tension with the pawns staring at each other in the center.
Yes, and also there is this spin on the knight on f7, yes, so the queen on c4. But black also has some counter chances attacking the g2 pawn with something like knight f4. Is that possible or not? There are all these forking ideas on e7, yes, so then white can take rook takes f4, e takes f4, knight e7 check.
Maybe we can show
just to
that.
highlight this, yeah. If knight f4 happens with the ideal desire to deliver checkmate on g2, then white can, for example, take on f4, e takes f4, go knight e7 check. Now this is a fork. So we have to take, then white takes with the rook on e7. We are still having this spinning issue. White has this active rook, but at the same time there are no direct threats. And who knows if black has time to push the move f4, f3, opening up some fire against white's king. It can be very messy. A lot of tension here.
But I would be so scared as black to walk into this position with this deadly pin on f7. There are back rank issues to deal with as well. A big moment for Alireza right now. And let's check in with the clock situation. He's got some time. That's the good news. Because for these kind of positions, you really want to calculate. You can't play on intuition so much, Peter.
Yes, absolutely not. Basically, playing on intuition means that probably you're going to lose in a couple of moves. Yeah, very precise calculation, move per move calculation is required. For me, it's very easy to highlight that yes, maybe after f3 we'll have counterplay. If not, we design. Yeah, so it's really a lot of tension for them.
But I want to ask you, right? Because f3 really feels like the most dramatic move in the position, and it hasn't been played quite yet. This line, no, first,
Yeah.
we don't need to deep dive into it, but I think it would have been a chaotic mess, Peter. Instead, Alireza goes for a more safe, cautious approach. He first sidesteps any forks on e7. He sidesteps the pin on f7, keeps the tension on the board. But this does give white the time to actually push the d-pawn, attack the queen, and this d-pawn can prove to be a very dangerous pawn eventually.
Well, also it supports knight e6. Yeah, so black has to keep the pin alive on the c file. That's at least my kind of feeling. Yeah, that but queen b6 runs into rook b1. Yeah, because that would be a pin on the knight. Yeah, and then we would need just one more move to activate with rook c8, but we don't have this time. Queen b6 is met by rook b1, and then if we go back, then already white invades with the rook to b7. We can't allow that. Wow, it's kind of scary. It's obvious that white has wonderful position, but I think to understand what's really going on, we have to pass it back to Nicholas.
Sure, yes. So king h8 was actually not a good move because of allowing d5. And the line that you were looking at with knight f4 was the correct way to go forward, because in this position that you pointed out, completely spot on, Peter and Tanya, f3, and there's counterplay, and the position is almost equal at this point. Maybe a slight advantage for white still. After king h8, however, after d5, black has to be very careful to not be completely lost immediately. And the only way to do that is not to move the queen back to c8 or something like this, because the pawn is just running out the board. d7 is threatened next, and black is in huge trouble, but you have to play queen b6, and what you have to realize is that after rook b1, which would be the natural response to get rid of this pin along the a7 g1 diagonal, you have to move knight to d6.
Super.
So this is very difficult to spot this counterattack on the white queen. And even here, after next moves, white should have an advantage, but it is not as clear as in after other lines. So firouzja, let's be honest, he did not spend his time well, only spending maybe 1-2 minutes on king h8, and now after d5 he's in a lot of trouble, and if he doesn't find queen b6 followed by knight d6, he is in a lost position, Tanya.
A very critical moment and a very critical line resource pointed out by you, Nicholas. Knight to d6 after the move queen b6, and look at that, Alireza Firouzja with head in hands. If he doesn't find queen to b6, he's close to losing this one out. And with Magnus, you're probably not going to get a second chance. He has to find this geometry that after queen b6, you invite another attack on the queen, but you don't need to defend your own queen. You can go after your opponent's queen, and the main idea is to make sure Magnus doesn't get that d5 pawn to d6.
Yes, wow, but this queen b6 rook b1, because your brain automatically, like I was explaining, yeah, queen b6 runs into rook b1, and that's definitely favors white. However, when suddenly Nicholas was saying that there is something, of course, knight d6, this of course effect, yeah, which you never have during the game, because nobody signals you that, there is something in this direction. Very critical moment for Alireza. Will he spot it? On the other hand, this is very much his trademark,
Yes.
to find these unexpected resources, but he needs to invest the time.
I think he will. Peter, exactly what you said at the very end, that it is Alireza's style to find these offensive ways, these creative ways to defend a difficult position. It's not his style to play queen c8 and allow d6 and to go into this complete passivity. He's thinking he needs to spend that time. He's doing it. For most people, I think queen b6, knight d6 is a very hard find, but Alireza Firouzja is not most people. I think there's a huge chance that he's going to find it. What about you, Nicholas? Do you think he's going to play this move?
Well, it is a little bit lack of alternatives. Also, I want to point out one more other beautiful line. Queen c7, you could think, well, I'm still keeping an eye on d6 and I still keep the pin. Well, I don't know if you mentioned this already, but here, knight takes g7 is just absolutely brutal, because if you take this knight, then there is knight e6 check and the queen is undefended on c7. And you just lose the queen against two minor pieces, and you might as well resign. So this, of course, he will spot. And
but sorry, one question after
Yes.
knight takes g7, knight d6. What is the reaction? Because I was trying to.
You can take on e8, yeah?
Okay, yeah.
Still hitting the queen,
Wow.
and in the end, white will be up material. So if you realize queen c7 is losing, if you realize queen c8 d6 looks really bad, then you have to look for alternatives. But of course, as Peter pointed out, you don't know during the game that there is still a continuation which is somewhat okay, which is queen b6 followed by knight d6. And that is the tricky part, to even realize that there is still a way to stay in the game. And Firouzja, I think he's still trying to find his way, but he's not looking very let's say positive right now. He looks a bit almost resigned already. If I read his body language.
Of elimination. And as you pointed out, if Alireza sits back, which he is sitting back on the camera right now, and thinks about each of these moves, there is a very big chance that through the process of elimination, he will come to understand that queen b6 is the resource and will find it, but he needs to take his time. It's already been about a 3-minute think right now. Peter, what do you think? In these kind of situations, the more time he takes, does that imply that he will play queen b6, or does that imply that he's not able to find anything in the position?
Yes, somehow from his body language, I'm not seeing that he has already found something that attracts his attention. Yeah, this is what I'm really missing. Yeah, because if you suddenly spot this queen b6, rook b1, knight d6 idea, you want to double check, you want to make sure if it's working, but then he goes it.
It's on the board, Peter. He finds queen b6, and Magnus, about to play the rook to b1, has immediately knight d6 on the board.
Wow. So that's about me reading Alireza's body language.
Well, difficult.
Yes, of course, Alireza knew. I'm trolling the commentators. I'm also trolling Magnus Carlsen, my opponent. I signal like I don't know what's going to happen, and then he blitzes out the two best moves. In fact, the only moves to stay in the game. Wow.
And Magnus, he does that eye raise. I wonder if Magnus missed this resource, because if Black did not have this, Magnus is close to a winning position. Perhaps in his head he already felt that this was close to being over, and now he has to rethink himself. He has to reset his own mind right now. Knight d6. But let's also deep dive into this position. Why is this such an important resource? And Peter, perhaps you can break it down for us, the different threats and ideas that exist here.
Well, first of all, that once we trade that monster knight from f5, yeah, and with our passive knight from f7, that's already good news. Also, if white takes on d6, then I don't know if I should take on f1 or not, but I just want to highlight that with queen takes d6, I get some stability. Yeah, the black's queen on d6 is now blocking the d5 pawn. I know that I will have some counterplay with knight f4. The d5 pawn can be a weakness. It's of course a very strong pawn, but also potentially it can be weak. The knight on c5, yes, it can jump to e6, but again, somehow it feels like black might be able to handle this, and it changes the scenario. Yeah, before it looked like you are in a very bad, in a lot of trouble, in a very bad position, and all of a sudden you feel like you have place to breathe for your pieces, and there are chances to come back.
And it was all about making sure that that white pawn on d5 remains blocked on d5. White doesn't get the time to push it to d6, because that would have been busted for black. So Alireza Firouzja finding the key defensive resource, and now it's Magnus Carlsen on the think. Nicholas, is there a way in this position for Magnus to keep the tension? Is there a way for him to defend the queen and the knight and just keep the pressure on?
There's not really. He needs to trade pieces, and he should trade the knight. And black can take back immediately. Maybe it's even better to take the rook first on f1, because white has to take back with the rook. If the queen was to take, then, well, black would take first this knight with check and then the other one. So this is no good. So the rook would have to take. The queen takes on d6. And still white is better here, because the pawn is still a strong threat. Knight e4 looks very, very logical. And here black could gain a tempo, giving a check. The king goes to the side, I would expect. And, oh, excuse me. Well, here we go. The king goes to the side. And it still looks uncomfortable. This knight on g6 is not ideally placed. And the pawn is strong on d5. Black is going to suffer either way, and Carlsen is definitely still the favorite to win this, but Firouzja is hanging on. Maybe he can defend this position.
Yeah, there had been also the moves had been coming in. Knight takes d6.
We have this position.
Rook takes f1 check, exactly as you described. Rook takes f1, queen takes d6 on the board. And now it's Magnus to make sure, yeah, the move knight e4 that you highlighted, it's such a love. I'm just loving this type of moves, and you highlighted that black has this knight on g6. Yeah, if black's knight would be on f6, we would be actually saying that black has perfectly equalized. There are no problems, but this misplaced knight on g6 is a very special element. Knight on e4, it's a blockading knight, a lovely structure in front of the isolated e5 pawn, and then after knight e4, it's clear that the pawn on d5 will be still a very important asset.
And that is the key about this position. Can black stop that pawn from advancing? Can white get d6 in, which will decide who this position will favor? But it's clear Magnus is in driver's seat. He's the one who's pushing for a win in this one. Let's take this moment to zoom out and get an update on our other boards, bringing up our bird's eye view. 4 big games in action. We saw the Magnus Alireza, that's the third board from the right. Evaluation bar giving a big advantage. And speaking about a big advantage, it looks like Fabiano Caruana just got a big advantage with a check on h5. Massive things happening on around. Vincent Keymer, he's down in exchange, but it looks like he's managing to prove that compensation. Second board from the right there.
Yes, I think we probably even have to jump right in there. We have seen some big developments. I think maybe Nicholas can guide us through.
Sure, yes. I believe Vincent is playing an excellent game right now. He sacrificed the exchange early on, as we saw, and now he opened up the way to the white king here, playing the very powerful move e4. And if white was to play the pawn forward, which actually would have been the best choice still for white to give up the exchange in this way, play king f2 and give back the exchange, then, well, black would have been also better. But here after taking, now the rook comes in, and you see the bishop lined up, you see the knight, you see the queen. all of the black pieces are participating in the attack, and this is really bad news for Ding, who's staring down a potential third loss in a row. So he played rook d1 now, protecting the pawn on d5, but already I'm looking at moves like knight h3 check or bring the rook over. I mean, this looks absolutely horrible, and I haven't even asked the engine. We see the evaluation is -9. Oh Lord, this is a lot. Knight h3 check apparently is winning the game. King h2 and rook h4 over. And the point is, and that's actually something that Vincent will easily spot, is if white takes on on h3, there's the move queen g4.
Wow.
But this is basic puzzle rush for Vincent. He will obviously spot that there's no way to defend this sensibly on h3, and if you cannot take on g3, well then there are different discovered attacks coming in. Vincent should take this one home.
He's reaching out, and he finds the first move of the line that you pointed out, knight h3, and that is the follow-up that has to happen, Nicholas.
He will
King
find
h2, rook h4. Will Vincent make this move? Well, he has to, right, if you go in for knight h3, because otherwise white is just threatening to take that knight.
Yes, and he's like double checking the line. Yeah, he still has time. The big question, yeah, rook h4, queen takes f5, there is knight f4 check or knight f2 check. Winning the queen, yeah, that's kind of a very nice, cute little tactic.
Let's show it.
That we
Even
can show.
checkmate.
No, he doesn't.
He doesn't.
Wow, he played queen
no.
d6 check.
Well, queen d6 also wins.
But let's also show that after queen d6, what happens if white would have grabbed that knight with the king? Peter, if we can just back up and show this line. King takes h3, you take the knight, but you end up losing your king because there's a check on h6, forcing the white king to g3, and I think queen h4, queen g4. But where's the checkmate here?
No, it's white is still running the
Where
way.
is the checkmate?
Well, I was also thinking like rook h4 check was also tempting. I did not, because there is bishop c8 check is not checkmate. I wanted to highlight that rook h4 takes and then check, king g5,
Queen
then some
h6.
check and bishop c8 check after king f5. But there is king e4 back. So let's head to Nicholas. He knows.
Well,
he can answer.
it's a quiet move. Sometimes the quiet moves are the difficult ones. Rook g4
The
and
zone.
threatening on g3 and h6 at the same time, and there's absolutely no way white can defend this checkmate next move.
Well, actually, Ding went to play g3. g3 is on the board already.
Yes, g3 was played, and now it's Vincent. Well, he's still winning, -6, but I think rook h4 would have been very clear cut. There's just nothing that white could have done here. And here the game continues, but he should still be a big favorite. Only his time, 1 minute on the clock, is worrying me a little bit. However, I still think he will take this one home.
And the line that Nicholas is pointing out would have been game over in 2 moves had he played the move rook h4. And maybe while he's thinking, you can, I don't know if you have the ability to just back up and show that, because it was really quite the moment here. Instead of queen d6, the idea of rook to h4, and you were pointing out why white can't take on f5, Peter.
Yes, because I think that intuitively he might have thought like, okay, queen takes f5, not gonna go for it. But actually black has this idea of going knight f4 check or knight f2 check. And thanks to the check, suddenly black will be able to pick up the queen on f5 because the rook won't be protecting that queen anymore. Yeah, so it's let's just put me like
Even
this.
checkmate
and
here.
even checkmate on g2. Finish. No, it's over. Yeah. So wow. Yeah, it was a missed opportunity. But let's go back to live action.
And now Vincent is playing on seconds. He has a winning position, but no time on the clock.
Yeah, Nicholas, you have the current position.
Yes, here we go. So, yeah, Ding has to play against Vincent's time. He has to, because that's his only chance. So we saw knight back, rook takes f5, queen h6 check, king g1. The only winning move is rook takes e3 was played by Vincent. All of the black pieces are still attacking the king, which is completely deserted. There's no defenders around the king. And rook takes g3 is an obvious strong threat. This, well, what is white going to do? I don't even have a suggestion, really.
Well, he played rook df1 and Vincent down to 15 seconds.
There's a mate in 1 threatened on f8, so
Yeah,
watch out.
Oh, wow. Now you have to really calculate well. Now you really have to calculate well.
He gives
You
a
can
check
take-
on
G3.
G3. We're getting moves really quickly. The players are blitzing out. Vincent playing on 10 seconds now. He has to make his move. White is coming in with threats. He has to be careful. He
Queen
plays
H3,
Queen H3.
powerful.
Queen
Good move.
H3 played. Wow. This is one of these silent moves, yeah, which are so easy to miss.
And you're hitting that rook on f3, but rook on f5, right now defended by the queen. But more importantly, you're using the time that white doesn't have rook f8 to bring your queen to a powerful check. Now rook f8 is a threat. Knight
King E1
jumps in.
played.
Knight f3 check given.
And the rook on f1 is hanging. That's the key move behind, the key idea behind queen on h3. So white can't run away with the king to d1.
And if king e2, you've got rook to g2.
Well, also bishop a6 check.
Oh, bishop a6.
Let's not forget about this monster. Wow. Exactly, yeah. So white has to take on f3, but that's basically a losing position. Then also, if you have 10 seconds, by the way, Vincent already has now 24 seconds. He should have this in.
And for Dingler, the nightmare continues. This would be if Vincent converts this, which it looks like it's headed that way, for Dingler, that would be his third loss in a row.
Yes, yeah, it's kind of very sad. And the problem is that if you keep on losing, you are not getting this confidence, yeah, because I think why the youngsters are enjoying it so much, because they feel that the game is going, yeah, they try something, they are willing to risk, going for complete sacrifices, everything, and it works. You get all the energy and you enjoy, you think like, yeah, freestyle chess, this is the best game in the world, yeah, but if you are like Dingler, who gets checkmated all the time, he is getting frustrated.
This has been a difficult start for Ding at the freestyle chess. And let's just point out the different lines. White was forced to give back the material. Black can simply recapture on f3. And now if we do a material count, Vincent has 2 extra pawns. And even greater than that is White's exposed king on e1 with the opposite color bishop dynamics.
And Ding resigns.
It's all about the attack on the king, and that is Dingleren's third loss in a row. For Vincent, a great day continues. He drew with Magnus, took down Levan Aronian, and now takes down the world champion. Dingleren really needs to bounce back in the final game of the day, Peter.
Yes, or to limit the damage and then try to get back tomorrow. Yeah, you never know.
All right, let's zoom out of this one as the live action continues on our other boards. Let's get into the Magnus Carlsen Alireza fight that we had. A lot of trades have happened. Nicholas, get us up to date with the live action.
Absolutely. So let's see if firouzja was able to defend. We left around here. And to my great surprise, Carlsen did not play knight to e4, which Peter wanted to see so badly. Instead, he played knight e6, and that really gave all of his advantage away in one move. Here now, firouzja played knight to e7, and okay, let's just quickly go through it. And the knight on e6 looks pretty, but the pawn, it was all about the pawn. Now the pawn is gone. Here the queens were traded, and this looks, at this point, pretty safe for black. The pawns are equal, king forward. You can push the pawn forward. This should end in a draw, and another disappointment for Magnus. If this game draws, if he draws this game, he is still to win his first game in freestyle chess here at weissnhause.
What's going on with the kings today, Peter?
Well, the youngsters, the jacks are very dangerous, and you know, this is what we talked about, yeah, that they are just so happy, yeah, they love to play chess, and now they don't have to study theory and so on. They have all this energy, they are young, they are fresh, enjoying everything, but clearly the kings will try to bounce back, and it's a long event, it's a marathon event, so you can afford to have a slow start. As we talked about, Dingleren also is not out at all, yeah? The knockout stage will be a completely different affair.
And that scene in front of us, I think it tells the full story of the game that we've just witnessed. Magnus Carlsen having such a pleasant advantage out of the opening, finding all the right squares for his pieces. But when that critical moment came, and I think it all came down to Alireza finding that resource with queen b6, knight d6, changing the dynamics of the position, and that took Magnus by surprise, taking away all his advantage. The d3 pawn, how dangerous is that in this position?
Well, I think it's not about being really dangerous. White is covering that pawn well enough, but it will distract White's forces, and in the meantime, Black will somehow organize. It's still a question. Rook d8 would be a natural move, but it might run into rook h8 check. Let's just highlight this, yeah, that it could be a trick. Rook d8, rook h8 check, takes, knight f7 check, and then this knight endgame with white's king very close to the d pawn can be tricky.
All right, so tactics still on the board, and Alireza is tactically very sharp. He throws in a check first on f8, inviting white's king to actually step closer to that pawn. And I'm just wondering if after the move king to e3, we're going to see more tactics with that black knight jumping onto d5. And watch out, king e3, knight d5. Do not pick up that pawn on d3.
Yes, because then the fork is coming on f4. And it shows that, yeah, rook f8 was a very well-timed check. Nicholas is agreeing. It means that, yeah, it was a very, yeah, rook f3 had been played, and now the question is...
Now your idea, maybe.
Now you can move the rook because there are no more rook h8 tricks. If that was important, we don't know. I was just making things up, or was it really in the position?
Well, rook f8 was one of several moves, but you're absolutely right that rook d8 could have been a bit dangerous. Even here the computer still says the position is equal after this nice intermezzo, this nice tactic here, but it feels a little bit dangerous. Yeah, now the variation is going up a little bit. Okay, also put a king on g8 instead of g7, but in any case there was no need to allow this, and firouzja, rook f8, very smart move, rook f3, and now he's going into this endgame. I'm a bit surprised that he's going for this because it feels dangerous for black. He could have kept the rooks on the board, like you said. After rook f8, rook f3, just play rook to d8, for example, and he should be fine here. Activate the rook via the fifth rank. But let's get updated to the current position, and we are in a knight endgame now, which he has to be careful, firouzja.
Yeah, knight endgames are always nightmare, yeah, if you are on the defensive side, yeah, because the knight on e4 actually dominates black's king on e7. Black would love to jump with the king to e5, but king e6 runs into knight c5 check, picking up that vulnerable pawn. The pawn on d3 is now quite a big weakness because white's king is so close, and white can slowly, like with g3, h4, build up the pressure if black is just... And fields are down to 13 seconds.
Wow, it is all eyes on firouzja. He needs to make a big decision at the moment. He goes with a5. He's waiting for white's knight to jump to c5 because then he'll start pushing the d pawn. He needs to use that as a distraction for white's king to step over towards that d pawn so that his own knight can start targeting the king's side pawns. So Magnus takes away some key squares, taking away the knight jumping onto f4. For firouzja, again, the ball is in his court. Not an easy move to make. Down to 5 seconds. 4, play a move. a4.
a4, yeah, he wants to, yeah, basically he's creating another weakness for himself, but his idea is that if you go after the a4 pawn, then he might run onto the a3 pawn, yeah, so knight c5, picking up that pawn gives black the chance of going knight c3, knight b1. He fixed the weakness on a3, so if he can give up even both pawns, yeah, Magnus is trying to beautifully regroup, but now black gets activity.
Yeah, because the black king can now start stepping forward with no knight forks in the air, and maybe black will start looking for activity as well. Just compare, the white king doesn't have hope of coming towards the d3 pawn as the e3 square is defended by that knight on d5. Meanwhile, give black 2 moves, that black king will land on d4.
And Magnus is down to 6 seconds.
He needs to play, and knight d2 just felt like a bit of a shaky retreat by him.
And he needs to make a move.
He does, he gives a check. Alireza moving forward, Magnus moving backwards.
But hang on, this is even dangerous.
King d4?
Yeah, king d4. Okay, knight takes a4. Really relying on this?
Knight c3?
Oh my god, my heart is not taking this. It's just so scary.
Yeah.
No, this is too scary.
Can you go knight c3 now?
Yeah, then knight b2. And okay, I'm already willing to sacrifice my knight.
Has to go back knight b2. I think knight b2 was the only move, by the way, Peter, because if white would have traded, and maybe we'll show that at the end, if white would have traded, that's a lost king pawn ending, even though black is down a pawn. That d3 pawn is a monster. To me, it looks like Magnus has allowed too much activity.
Yeah, way too much. But on the other hand, yeah, also black needs to watch out. Yeah, just blindly pushing d2 and d1 would be a bad idea, because suddenly white would have 2 flank pawns. The knight would be kind of overloaded, and only white could win. So knight e4 check, and he wants to go king f3, knight d check, and knight c4, probably to keep on harassing that knight.
And there can be no knight trades in this position for Magnus Carlsen, because then that king pawn ending will once again be lost, as Peter is highlighting. Perhaps what is the plan? We might be seeing this played out. He first steps over. Is he king c3? Looks like it probably isn't possible because there's a knight d1 check in that position. So you still have to calculate. Alireza, 7 seconds.
Dramatic action because, yeah, down to 2 seconds, yeah, he pushes d2 correctly. My line with knight d2, knight c4 run also into the idea of knight takes d3, sacrificing the knight for the pawn. Yeah, so he pushes d2.
King c3 we're expecting now.
Yeah, but now Magnus is back in control. Yeah, he's not risking anything anymore. Knight d1 and a4.
Who needs to be careful in this position now?
Now black. Now black needs to, because we have this outside passer moving up.
And the point is that after knight c3, white trades and then the king comes back to d1 and white is winning that king pawn ending. So firouzja has to retreat with his knight to stop this mammoth a pawn that Magnus has rolling down the board.
Wow, another question, why? Oh, it's like zugzwang position. Yeah, if you go h4, then knight e4 and going after the g3 pawn with check, and then you lose the control of the d1 knight. It's a study-like position with couple of seconds. It's crazy. This is chess, ladies and gentlemen.
This is freestyle chess, ladies and gentlemen. And you're completely right, but it is a race. You have to calculate because h4, knight e4, a6. Maybe we can show it with arrows as the players are taking a think here. And the line that you were mentioning earlier, a6, you take with the check. The king moves anywhere. You grab the knight on d1 and you're just in time with the d2 pawn. Magnus Carlsen, he steps up with his knight to e3. Alireza, he's taking a pause. He has to keep that a-pawn under control. But does this give Magnus enough time to push the h-pawn now? h4, g4.
Yeah, but then knight b4, and he's going for knight c2 or knight d5, depending. Yeah, Magnus immediately jumps back to d1. What a dramatic endgame.
And it's still not over.
No, not at all.
What is Alireza's resource here? He reaches out, he attacks. What a move. He's putting pressure on a5, and that knight is jumping to d4 with a check.
Yes, double attack. He needs to create threats. And now Magnus also needs to calculate with 15 seconds on the clock. Where does this lead? a6, knight d4 check, and then king takes d1.
And everything's falling apart around us as well in this crazy position. Knight f2 played, and Alireza snaps up the pawn. I think, Peter, this now will end in a draw.
Yes, because Magnus, I think, correctly understood that, yeah, he just can't rely on his a-pawn. He makes sure that he controls the d-pawn, creates the h-passer. Black has to watch out. He has to activate that knight. The knight has to, I don't know, from c6, e5 to, yeah, this is kind of natural. The knight is heading towards the f7 square. Knight e5, knight f7.
And white will also always have the idea of knight d3, knight b4 checks to grab that d2 pawn eventually. Alireza starts with a check. He wants to control it with the f5 square, take the h6 square under control.
Little bit strange for me to invite that king, knight f5, king f4, because it's known that the flank pawn, the h-pawn and the a-pawns are very dangerous against the knight. He really believes that this is still all fine. It should be, because the pawn is still far away.
And Alireza knows exactly what he's doing. We're going to head into a king versus king position. What a dramatic fight this was. Another roller coaster battle, and that's what we've come to expect when Magnus Carlsen takes on Alireza Firouzja. Eventually ends in a draw, but the game was not peaceful at all, Peter.
Not at all. It was fantastic, incredible action, but it gives us the chance to jump right into Fabiano against Nurirbek Abdusattorov. It's also kings versus king.
And perhaps, Nicholas, you can break down the last few moves. I think that was the final remaining game of this round. What happened in Fabiano versus Nurirbek?
Well, let's go back a few moves, but I think it has been equal for a long time. Caruana seemed to be pressing, but could not really get anywhere. So I think it was a well-fought game by both players. We didn't cover that much, but from what I can tell is that it was a pretty even game throughout, and a draw was a fair result. And so the third round has concluded. We have once again had two decisive results and two black wins once again. And one thing I want to point out, so far the kings have not been able to win a single game against the jacks.
Wow.
Hey, once again, also in this round, Vincent Keymer, a jack here in this tournament, and Gukesh. They beat the experienced players, the kings here, Aronian and Ding. So the kings are struggling overall, and the jacks are, like you're saying, enjoying themselves, having a lot of fun. We have one more round to go, and I'm looking forward to this one, guys.
Which is so ironic, because when we talk about the jacks of the younger generation, we're always thinking about this great opening preparation that they have, Peter. And I would think that you take that out of the equation, you take opening preparation out of the equation, and you're talking about, you know, creativity from move number one, just that understanding, that feel of the position. In my head, I would feel that that experience would count so much for the kings, but the jacks are proving me completely wrong here.
Yeah, they are inspired, they are full of energy, they are just enjoying, they handle the situation, the nervous situations also extremely well with little time on the clock. They have been seeing Gukesh beating Magnus Carlsen with couple of seconds, showing tremendous precision. Vincent is doing extremely well, but let's not count the kings out. I think that the older guys, because the kings are the older guys, they need to adjust. Yeah, so maybe they are also kind of very smart. They know it's a marathon event. You can't immediately, you can't be showing your best chess in all these 8 days, yeah, of fully packed chess. They are using it as a warm-up, and they will be bouncing back tomorrow or today's last round, or if not, then in the knockout stages.
Peter, you're the eternal optimist. At some point, you want the kings to bounce back. Well, they've got to do it really soon. We've got one more rapid game that is coming up in this round robin, the final game of the day. And there we have our standings going into the final game. And someone in our studio is extremely pleased to see the standings right now.
Yes, of course, I'm very happy for Vincent, but it's a long event. The most important, he should enjoy what he's doing, and just it's really fantastic to be here, to have this tournament, to have this experience of playing against the best players in the world in freestyle chess. Let's continue in the same spirit.
To me, what stands out in this leaderboard, Nicholas, is that Magnus is yet to win a game in freestyle chess.
Yeah, that is something we're not used to seeing, but as Peter also said earlier, Magnus often has a bit of a slow start. He will really still kicking himself for this loss that should have been a win against Gukesh, and that would, of course, paint a completely different picture. But there are still 4 rounds to go, and in the end for Magnus, I think, of course, he wants to do well, but he